to another episode of Jazz Cats, the coolest show about jazz culture. And when I say jazz culture, I mean everything that's unique, sophisticated, avant garde, stylish, just cool. That's it, right? I try and we try here at the station to promote jazz culture where not just the music. The music is the foundation of the culture, but the music evolves as well. And so, for all us young people out here that may think that jazz is grandma and grandpa's music, or it's too artsy, or whatever that the reason is that you're not following jazz and supporting jazz, or even creating jazz music, then we strive to educate and debunk all these myths and all these rules of engagement, as it were. And so the music evolves and the culture evolves. So that's what we talk about here on Jazz Cats. And I'm happy today to have a jazz master in the house. It's good for me that it's a Detroit native, but I really want you guys to get to know this artist, and he's a educator as well as a musician and a creative force. So without further ado, thank you for tuning in to Jazz Cat streaming live every Tuesday evening on Wjzz Cool TV, the coolest station in the world, streaming live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, and we'll soon be back on other top social media outlets, Instagram, whatever. But welcome today, Dr. Professor Leonard King.
Hey, thank you, Roger. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, by the way. Thank you very much.
I try, man.
Yeah.
I want to get right into it, but like I was telling the audience, it's a pleasure for me personally. I always like, that's the perk of doing this, that I get to meet so many creative people. I get to meet so many talented people, and every now and then I get to meet some masters of this art. Right, so it's a personal pleasure for me, and I hope the rest of the audience enjoys. But want to let you tell about yourself. I know you're a Detroit native, and so you take it from there and just introduce yourself in the sense, give us some background.
All right. I was born Leonard Clyde King Jr.
Okay.
February 14th, 1948. So I'll be celebrating my 76th birthday coming up
Okay,
soon.
cool.
And I was born at Burton Mercy Hospital when it was located on East Hancock and Brush Street over on the east side.
Well, not far from here.
Yeah. And by the way, that was part of the Detroit Black Medical Strip
Okay.
because in those days, of course, black doctors and nurses and medical people
Sorry, Gerald.
could not practice their craft. Am I there now?
You good.
They could not practice their craft at any hospital. So Detroit, being the fact that there were so many very creative people, and just like the old saying, to create a way out of no way.
Right.
So you had them in the arts, you had them in medicine, you had them in all kind of professional endeavors here in the city. So, and as far as music is concerned, I was still in elementary school when I decided that my life was going to be in music
Okay.
as a musician.
Okay.
And also at that time, I decided that I wanted to be able to learn and participate in as much music that I could possibly participate in. Now, here's the reason I say that. I understand where all these labels come from. I've done research on how the word jazz, blues, and all that came into being. Well, let's just start with blues,
Okay.
okay? In 1920, and even prior to that, there was a pianist, an early record producer. That's what we will call him now,
Okay.
but not in 1919. There were no record producers back then. The record business was still in its infancy.
Okay.
So this guy named Perry Bradford, who was a pianist, and he saw that that the African American population in the United States was big enough. New York, Chicago, Detroit, wherever, Atlanta, all over this country, to have a significant market to sell products by African American artists to African American neighborhoods.
Right.
You know, so nobody was interested. Let's say between 1910 and 1919, nobody cared. They didn't even think that black people had record players
Right.
back then, you know, because that was still a new medium at that time,
Right.
which started with cylinders before it became flat disc. So Perry convinced the people at Paramount Records that there was a market for black music to be sold to black audiences. And one of his artists that he was grooming was a woman named Mamie Smith. And so the record that became the big hit for Mamie was called Crazy Blues. Now check this out. When she said, "I got the crazy blues, I can't eat at night, I can't, I can't, wait a minute, I can't sleep at night, I can't eat a bite," you know, she was talking about her personal situation being messed up
Right.
and being out of balance. And she was trying to figure out, naturally in the lyrics of the song, what to do to get her life back in order. So she said, "I got the crazy blues." But blues wasn't a music.
Right.
So you know how, but it became a hit. $50,000 copies rather in 1920.
Right.
That was unheard of.
Right.
And so you know how it is in this country. One company has a hit, and everybody in the same
Gotta
business
rush
is
the
looking at that.
market.
They got to rush the markets. Now you got a market. I want more of that blues. Give me more of that blues. But see, there was no such thing.
Right.
They in turn created a market of something that didn't exist.
Coined the phrase and commercialized.
Yeah, and it was the same with the word jazz, because jazz was a racial slur.
Okay.
You know, like the polite way of saying the N word these days.
Right. Right.
That's what the music meant, you know. So, you know, I understand all that. I don't get
So
uptight.
this is the first time I heard that part of the history of where the word jazz came in. So I know you're an educator, so give us just a little bit more on that. So
Okay. I've read two different accounts. There's one account that I've read where people say, well, someone wrote that the word jazz came from the word jazir, which is supposed to be West African word. And jazz meant to speed up,
Okay.
to excite. Well, in the early days of African American music, it was called syncopated music. It wasn't like Bach or Brahms, you know. So when you got this kind of rhythm going, da da boom ba doo ba 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 ba, that's not of the European culture,
Right. Right.
you know. So that's how that term, you know, became applied to that music, to excite, to speed up, rhythmic, syncopated, you know.
Okay.
But in the establishment of markets, you know, they got to call it something.
Right.
To this very day, they have to come up with a name for it.
Okay.
And historically speaking, it's never the musicians
It's
that name what they do.
It's the producers. It's the
It's,
salesmen.
it's the business people.
Right,
It's
yeah.
the business people, you know, who are looking to establish markets.
And that's what I was saying. When
This-
I say producers, those who produce
Yeah,
content,
that's right.
products.
Yeah, to sell products.
Right.
Exactly. So, so fast forward to now, and I've been looking at this because I thought, well, now this is my chance to name what it is I do.
Okay.
So check out what I came up with, Roger. You're gonna love this.
Okay.
The two words, roots and attitude. So I took from those two words and I came up with Rutude music.
Okay, root to.
Rutude.
Okay.
Rutude music. Now, I know some people will say, "Oh yeah, Leonard King, he plays jazz." I understand that, so I don't have a cow
Okay.
when people refer to me that. But I do want them to know I'm a native Detroiter, and starting from in my youth on into clearly to this particular day, as I'm sitting across from you right now,
Yeah.
I dedicated myself to learning about as many cultures of the world as I possibly could.
Hmm.
Look at where I was born and raised and grew up with. Detroit is an international city. It's not promoted as an international city,
Right.
but it is. So all these cultures are here. There was, back in the 50s and 60s, the booth broadcasting system, and of which at that time, I think WJLB was a part of that. And that was part of their ad. Booth broadcasting station of the nations. Well, that's where I first heard Arabic music.
Okay.
That's where I first heard the music of the Mexican culture because of the huge Mexican population that's here, the Arabic population that's here. They play country and Western music.
Right.
So all of that music caught my ear on Detroit airwaves at that time. And I had another plus factor going for me. My father was a jukebox operator. He owned and operated his own jukeboxes. So in our household, there was only two places where you didn't have records:
Right.
the bathroom and the kitchen. Every other place was fair game.
Right.
And two, you couldn't walk and breathe or go anywhere in this city without hearing that music.
Right. You know what? I appreciate you giving that history and that insight because it's in harmony with what we do here. WJZZ now, I took it to be an online station. It originally was an FM station,
Yes.
the oldest jazz station in the world. Uh, and it has African American roots. It was founded by African Americans, Dr. Cox and Dr. Bell from Bell Broadcasting. But I wanted it to be what you just said. I wanted it to be international.
Yeah.
And I want to feature uh, world music, jazz foundation. But I want people to know what is common in Brazil, with
Sure.
bossa nova,
Sure.
but it's beyond that. What in Cuba, and parts of Africa, and other parts of the United States. So like Fela Kuti and Hugh Masekela
Yeah.
and all that. So
Yeah.
uh, that's what we do here, and we just keep ramping up, trying to do more. So I appreciate you saying that.
That's the same thread that runs through all of it.
Okay.
I hear the relationship between Charlie Parker and Bob Marley.
Right.
Now, we're not taught that.
Right.
So, therefore, in reference to what you just said, this is an era of re education.
Yeah. So we
Yeah.
push the envelope on everything we do. But you know what? We're coming up to. I love good conversations because the time flies. So
That's
I'm gonna
true.
do a
That's
station
true.
ID real quick, and then we're gonna come back.
Okay.
So everybody, you got Dr. Professor Leonard King explaining not only his origins in the jazz culture and the art of music in general, giving us some roots to the history, but also being here to talk more about his life and his artistry. Thank you for tuning in to Jazz Cats, the coolest station in the world the coolest show in the world on WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. Streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and other top social media platforms. Like us, follow, share, and subscribe, everybody. And let us know. I need more comments and everything to how you give us some feedback about the show and the artists, and let us know who you want to see and what you want to talk about. So I'm going to get back to this and enjoy the rest of the show. So I'm going to get to Dr. Professor, but a couple of things you said so much when you opened up that I'm not taking notes. I'm taking mental notes. But where you come from, Now, was that considered? I know Detroit was a boom of entertainment and artistry back then, especially in the black communities, but in all these ethnic communities, they had a different sound and a different way how they moved. Was your neighborhood part of the Black Bottom or Paradise Valley?
No, I grew up in downriver Southwest Detroit.
Okay,
So
okay,
I grew up in the area that's commonly known, and well, yeah, and nothing has changed. It was commonly known as the Tri-City area. So
okay,
that part of Detroit on the other side of the Rouge River,
okay.
River Rouge and
So
Ecorse.
you were born in Detroit proper
Yeah,
on Hancock, right? Now,
yeah,
that's what I meant.
yeah, the hospital.
That was part of the Black Bottom at the time, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
All
yeah,
right.
definitely. So yeah, close to the north end.
Right. Okay. Got you.
Close to the north
So,
end.
so real quick, let's talk about. Uh, you said you knew from elementary school you wanted to be in jazz.
No,
You
in music.
in music.
In music.
So how'd you transition? Because I know your reputation, and I studied, and I see most of the information about you is related to jazz and education. So how did you get involved? Where we came to know you as a jazz artist? How did where did this come about?
Yeah, it's funny, Roger, that you say that because, for example, my first group, which started out as the Jazz Sextet, of course, we didn't play 100% whatever jazz was supposed to be
Right.
because I became a teenage band leader at 15, and I was mentored by the elders in the neighborhood. Let me just emphasize that there were so many people that were involved, neighborhood people, your neighbors who lived next door, across the street, around the corner. They had a say so
Okay.
in how we evolved as not just as musicians, but as human beings. So I really didn't have a chance to be out here goofing up, messing up, getting in trouble because I was mentored, man. You know, my father and some of the other elders, they when I decided to do this as a teenager, they taught me how to deal with contracts. They taught me the art of how to talk to people, deportment, getting along, and that kind of thing. So my father was the one that told me. He said, "Look, you've chosen this as your life." He said, "You try to learn some of everybody's money. I'm just music rather.
Right. Right.
I'm repeating some of everybody's music." He said, "Because you don't know who's going to call you
Right.
to work with them." And he said, "And when they call you, they don't want to hear nothing about, well, I just play jazz. I don't play no blues." He said, "No, no, 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 no." He said, when you do that, you set yourself up to be discounted because they're going to assume, well, that's all he knows. I'll call
Yeah.
somebody else.
So that's what I'm saying. So first let's establish this too. Cause see, yeah, your first group was a jazz sextet.
That's what I called it.
Right, but you were influenced by all types of music.
Man, we played everything in that band.
that's what I'm gonna get to that.
Yeah, we played Horace Silver, we played Hugh Masekela, we played the Mexican hat dance. We played everything. Desafinato when Bossa Nova was taken over, because I understood, for me, even at that age, as a performing artist, the more music that I knew, the more that I had up here, the more I worked.
I'm thinking that those artists, young artists watching now, should hear those words of wisdoms and incorporate all these other sounds and techniques into their creative process of music. But like, I know you're a percussionist, so tell us about how that came about. How did you decide upon that was going to be your instrument of choice or your
Well,
sound?
I sing and play.
Okay.
So I sang first. And, in those days, especially in the 50s and the 60s, there was a free period in Detroit public schools. They called that auditorium.
Okay.
I don't know how I just found out. I just found out how that came to be. So the teachers could take a break and put their lesson plans together.
Okay.
So at different parts of the day, they had this auditorium. Well, here we are, kids in the auditorium, just sitting there. So eventually, those sessions became talent shows.
Okay.
And those were the days where right before I started taking drum lessons. So I would always ask to get up on the stage and sing. So, and in those days, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Frankie Lyman, and the Teenagers, teacher, can I get up and sing?
Right.
Oh yeah. Oh, Young King, he wants to sing today. So I get up and sing the latest Chuck Berry song. I do the guitar intro. I do the duck walk. I do all that kind of stuff. At Boynton Elementary School in my old neighborhood, South 4th Street at Visger Road.
So how'd you get on the drums? Tell us how that came about.
You know, I honestly believe, I've heard it said that the instrument chooses you.
Okay.
I believe that because there was not any particular mindset that I had at that time where I said, I'm going to play the drums, and that's that. Why wasn't it the trombone?
Right.
Why wasn't it the piano? It was something about the drums that drew me in. And I think, it's not like now with the internet where you can go on and see damn near anything and anybody
Right.
play. No, that didn't exist back then. It was records and that was that. Well, unless you saw them on the Ed Sullivan Show or something like that. So I think I might have seen Buddy Rich on what they used to call the summer replacement shows on network TV when he was with Tommy Dorsey. But that was just fleetingly here and there.
Okay.
I was curious. That's another thing I want to raise, especially with young people, because I tell them, you guys, your curiosity is not that strong. You're only curious about a little bit. Now, here's why I'm saying this, Roger.
Okay.
I asked them an easy question. I say, are you familiar with Grant Green? And some kids will go, I think so. I think I heard of that name. I said, I just lobbed you an easy question. I didn't ask you, had you heard of Tina Brooks? I didn't go back to the 30s and ask you if you'd heard of Clarence Prophet, the pianist. That's one thing I'm noticing, and I don't want to finger point too much here, but because this music has now become very corporate in colleges and universities, which are corporations, man,
Right.
the difference between there is that being mentored in the community, the people who were in the audience, they were just as hip as the people on stage.
Okay.
Our next door neighbors, man, will come
What?
knock on the door. If we wasn't playing right, they knock on the door. They ring the doorbell. I hear you in here practicing, but y'all need to
Tighten up.
tighten up. Y'all need to work a little bit harder because that ain't it.
Well, I like
You
that.
know?
I like that what you said. And I got this from Miles Davis and Chet Baker about the being cool. So I equate jazz and the whole swag with being cool, and it was about being your best and being open minded to the sophistication of the world.
Well, it was,
Yeah.
I would even take that even further and say being hip, because when I say your neighbors was just as hip as the musicians on stage.
Yeah.
Oh, here's one of my favorite stories.
Okay.
If my wife was here, she'd be rolling her eyes because she's heard the story a zillion times, but you haven't.
Okay.
There used to be afternoon jam sessions at TULC, Trade Union Leadership
Yeah,
Council,
up on Grand River.
on Grand River.
Right.
So that's where us young people could go, because we weren't old enough to play clubs. And I was glad to be there among the elders
Okay.
to play with them. So I'm talking about when I was, say, 16, 17 years of age. My brother Greg and I, who's a year younger than me, we got wind of that. So we went by there and we sat in. And when we got through playing, there was a woman who was sitting at a table, similar to this table that you and I are sitting at. She said, young man, come here, come here, come here. She said, I was listening to you two. She said, you all keep up. You keep at it, because I like what I heard. Stay on your instruments. Now, she said, have a seat here with me. There was a guy who got up after us playing alto sax. I remember it to this day. He got up, man, he was goofing around. I mean, he just wasn't happening on the instrument. And she looked at us and said, he's got no business being up there. Now, adults didn't do that with kids.
Right.
So the very next day, my brother and I went back.
Okay.
We got there. She motioned for us to come over and sit with her again. which we did. The guy who was playing the alto sax, who goofed up, he came in not long after us. She caught him. It's not long after he got in. He said, she said, excuse me, come here, come here. She said, what is your name? He told her his name. She said, now what are you getting ready to do? He said, well, I'm going to get up there and play. She said, no, you not. No, you not. I heard you in here last night. I heard what you played. She said, you not ready. You sit out here, you have a seat,
Right.
and you learn something. That's the Detroit that nurtured me,
Now,
that cultivated me. I knew that it wasn't, I didn't have too many chances
some
to be.
checks and balances.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it wasn't about cuteness then,
Yeah.
even though we were all cute.
Or talking about, oh, that's just my sound. That's just.
Oh, yeah. Or it wasn't like, you did your best, baby.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
did, no, It's just like in sports. They don't want no
I
excuses.
got, yeah. Do you happen to recall what that sax player's name
Nah.
was? Okay,
Nah.
so we don't know what happened to him.
He might have gone on to be a wonderful saxophonist and a human being. I mean, I was what, 17?
Yeah, yeah.
So I have no way of knowing unless I remember his face.
I was wondering if that was gonna evolve till he went and got better.
No.
And
What-
but you learned a lesson
Yeah,
from that too.
the point that was the point I wanted to make when I said the people in the audience, they were just as hip as the musicians
how
on
you said
stage.
that.
So you could be up on the stage goofing off if you wanted. You in those days, Detroit people called you out.
Yeah.
They will call
And
you out.
I personally feel we need to get back to that.
We do.
And so I'm gonna jump a little bit because we're talking about what is hip, right? And that's one of my favorite jazz records too. What is hip? I'm gonna jump into Lyman Woodard
Yeah.
because he, from what my ears have heard of his music, and I know you played with him, so you part of that swag. It was not what you call mainstream. I think even to this day, it's not a mainstream type of sound. So,
Well, Lyman, what he wanted to do, he wasn't trying to be like Art Blakey or Horace Silver or anything like that, even though he could do that.
Mhm.
You know, Lyman went to Oscar Peterson's school in Toronto. So you know what? I didn't find this story out until after Lyman died. Lyman, was a young prodigy growing up in Owasso, Michigan, outside of Flint, and so of course he took European classical piano lessons, which was very common, especially in the early '50s. But when he heard Little Richard and Fats Domino and different people like that, he wanted to be a part of that as well, which he did, and his mom really supported him.
okay.
His father, Lyman came from rich parentage. Okay, the Owasso wrought iron furniture business, that was just one of the family businesses in there, and Lyman's father expected him to go into the family business.
Okay.
Lyman didn't want any part of the family business. He wanted a life in music, and his mother was his champion to make sure
Okay.
that he would have a life in music. So Benny Poole, the saxophone player, who lived in Jackson, Michigan, who was with us up until maybe 3-4 years ago. He left here at the age of like 91, 92. He heard the talent in young Lyman Woodard and said to his mother, he's got that dexterity in both of his hands. You need to get him a Hammond organ.
Okay.
So that's how Lyman became an organist, because of Benny Poole.
Okay.
You know?
Hold that. We're going to pick it back up. I got to pay the bills around here. So everybody, you're hearing these fabulous stories and this history on Wjzz Cool TV, the coolest station in the world, on Jazz Cats, the coolest show on the air. And thank you for watching us live every Tuesday from 9 p.m. to 10 on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter. Like, follow, share, do all that good stuff. Tonight's our guest is Dr. Professor Leonard King, who's just blowing me away. with all this jazz history and insight. So I want you all to share this with your fellow jazz lovers and your culture enthusiasts, and join in the party and be hip. I really like that what you said about the audience being just as hip as the artists on stage. And
Yeah.
nowadays, it's like the audience is hipper sometimes, a lot of times, than the artist that's on stage, man. And I think, as a promoter, I want to put on good talent. I don't want to do the same old.
Of course.
But I want the people to bring it.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to do. But back to Lyman.
Back to Lyman Woodard. So here's what happened.
Yeah.
Benny Poole knew that Oscar Peterson had that school
In Montreal,
in
right?
Toronto.
Okay, Toronto.
In Toronto, and I think it was called the Oscar Peterson School of Advanced Technique or Methodology or something like that. And so Benny Poole told Lyman's parents that Oscar was coming to Detroit to play at Baker's Keyboard Lounge because Lyman's father, like I said, had already decided that his son, Lyman III, was going to go into the family business.
Right.
So Benny said, no, get him to Oscar Peterson and try to get him enrolled in that school. So they ventured from Owasso to Detroit, where Oscar was, and Oscar brought Lyman up on his intermission, and he said, play something. Oscar Peterson was very impressed with young Lyman Woodard's dexterity, and he told Lyman's father, I want him enrolled in my school.
So
So if it hadn't been for Oscar Peterson, we wouldn't know anything about Lyman Woodard
okay, well,
in
and
music.
I appreciate that, and I want to know, like through my research, you played a long time with Lyman Woodard.
Yeah.
Right? So what he must have had an impact on you.
Well, let me tell you this. See, this is an interesting story.
Okay.
In the mid 1960s, you could not drive down the Lodge Freeway. Once you got to the West Euclid overpass on the service drive, so we're talking about for on the west side, going for southbound traffic, you would see in big black and white letters, Lyman Woodard Trio, 5 nights a week. Those were the days of the Frolic Show Bar in their second location.
Okay.
Lyman was at the Frolic Show Bar for years, with the Lyman Woodard Trio. But check this out. He started there with the Don Davis Trio
Okay.
when Don was still playing guitar,
Okay.
And so Lyman took over when Don started getting more and more into producing and gave up the guitar like that. And so I think I had my driver's license, so we're talking about 1964, but, I was still under parental jurisdiction. So I could only get the family car every now and then,
Right.
But just going up and down the Lodge Freeway all the time and seeing Lyman's name, I decided then and there, Roger,
You was gonna be a part of that?
I was going to be a part of his band. Now, here's the interesting part of the story. I'd never seen Lyman. I didn't know what he looked like. I didn't know what instrument he played. I didn't know what music he played. I didn't know anything about the man. All I knew was I was going to play with him one day.
Okay.
So now here it is. I got Leonard King and the Soul Messengers, beginning in 1963. December 1967, I get drafted, in Uncle Sam's Army, as we used to call it. So I did 3 years. And then I got back out at January of 1971, and Leonard King and the Soul Messengers were still going strong. So I got back into there, and which lasted up until March of 73. In May of 73, I finally met Lyman.
Okay.
It was at a dance over at Mercy College. And a guy named bass player named Curtis Lucius called both of us. So I'm excited. I finally meet Lyman Woodard
Right.
on that gig. You know who else was on that gig? Rick Rouse, the guitarist,
Okay.
when he still lived here. So I became, an acquaintance with Lyman, and I told him that I had been looking forward to meeting him all of this time and shook his hand, and we exchanged numbers. The following month, June of 1973, I met Ron English
Right.
on a gig.
Right.
Okay? You see how this is unfolding.
Right.
I didn't know Lyman was checking me out. I had no idea. In August of 1973, I called both of them to play at a wedding reception that I was contracted to play and put a band together. So that's the first time the three of us performed together. That following September of 73, Lyman called both of us to be members of his newly formed Lyman Woodard Trio at the Hobby Bar,
Okay.
which was on Linwood at the corner of Buena Vista.
Right.
So that was my introduction to Lyman. But as far as I was concerned, I was already home because as far back as 1966, I said I was going to play with him.
Right. 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 And it took.
And here this is 1973, and I'm in the band.
Okay.
The influence of music and the attitude toward writing that I learned from being in that band with Lyman and Ron is energy that I have brought forth to this day. Because even though I had a lot of experience before I met them,
Right.
they were doing things with music that I hadn't arrived at yet. And I decided right on the spot, man, I don't want to be like the third wheel in here that doesn't fit in the trio. So I recorded all of our gigs. I listened to those tapes, and I hear myself how I sounded with them, and it's like, no, okay, I'll leave that out. I'll leave that. That doesn't feel right, And that's how I learned, because I wanted to sound like I belonged.
Right. 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 Right.
And I worked with Lyman for the better part of 35 years, up until he died February 24th, 2009.
Okay.
And one time I thanked Lyman, just out of the blue, years and years later. And he said, well, what are you thanking me for? I said, man, I learned just by observing. I never asked them questions about, what do you want me to play here? They never told me what to play.
Right.
They say, hey, I got some new music, and Lyman would start playing, or Ron would start playing, or they might give a general idea of what they wanted, but they never said, Leonard, no, you play this, play that, play this, play that. And if they handed me any music, it was an outline of the music, just to see what the chords were, but never as a drummer as to what to play.
Right.
So when we bonded as a trio, that was one of the biggest thrills of my life. And that's why I say to this day, Lyman will always be a very important part of my development.
Okay.
What I didn't know until after he died, his twin sisters, because I became very tight with them.
Okay.
And they said, whenever Lyman mentioned your name to us, he always referred to you as my brother Leonard. He didn't have a brother.
Right. Right.
He adopted me as his brother.
That's cool.
He never told me that.
Right. but I mean, that's when you know something is really sincere and
Yeah.
dear.
Yeah.
Is that you don't have to know how somebody feels about you.
Yeah.
Right. And I want to. We got a few minutes. We're closing in, man.
Okay.
There's so much about you I want the people to know. Like you played. You hosted a radio show called Full Circle.
Yeah.
And so you had some broadcast experience. What was that like? What did you make? Were you the main DJ, or how did that?
Yeah,
work?
that was my show. You know what? Bud Spangler, R.J. Spangler's uncle, that was his show, and he called it Jazz Today.
Okay.
Because he played all of the new releases, and then he would go back and play some older stuff too, but not that far back. He left Detroit and relocated to San Francisco,
Okay.
California, But he told the people at WDET, he made it clear to them at that time, when I leave, Leonard gets my show. You know, it was non-negotiable.
Right.
You know, so that's how I got on the air at that time. But at home, I used to pretend to be a DJ.
Now that was in what, 1976,
1976.
and you carried it to 80. Right?
That's right, to 1980. And you know, I'm a performing artist, right? So I'm used to seeing an audience. You know, that was no big deal. Being in radio, I had to learn. There's nobody in front of me.
Right.
So once I got past the
Yeah. So
in between words, I had to visualize my audience.
so what time slot were you doing?
At first, it was 10 a.m. to 1. And then I got moved to midnight to 3.
The reason why that intrigued me is because for any jazz show, and I assume back then that's when was it on Second Street back then?
It was in the School City building.
Okay, right.
On Woodward Avenue.
Okay, but it intrigued me because you had to play against WJZZ DJs at the time, and in 1970 WJZZ was at its strongest,
Well,
right?
here's the difference. It was public radio.
Right.
So a whole different set of rules. So we were able to be rebels
Oh, okay.
on the air.
Okay.
We played stuff that no commercial
So
radio.
give us a sample, a little comparison of what was happening on mainstream radio, and at that time it wasn't as many jazz stations.
No,
So
it
I'm
wasn't.
gonna give WJZZ the plug. So what they were doing versus what you did, and on the public.
I was in a position, if I wanted to, I could play something by Bob Marley, and then I could turn around and play some Native American music.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? And then I could turn around and play some music from the Inca tribes in Peru.
Okay, so you changed the format of jazz today to incorporating other music.
Everything, yeah.
Okay, so
that's why I called it Full Circle.
Okay, there you go.
If I wanted to play country, you know, I grew up listening to
I
that.
got you. So
yeah.
now it make more sense to
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
Okay, so you cleared that up. Now also explain a little bit about Stratanova.
Stratanova was the second group that I had after Leonard King and the Soul Messengers, and that was just the thing of putting two words together. I wanted to call the group Strata, but then one of the other band members decided that doesn't sound good by itself. We need another word to go with that, and so he said, "Well, how about Nova?" So I said, "No, let's put them both together." Stratanova. We said, okay, that's it. It's just that simple. It's just that, and there was nobody else that had that name.
Okay.
You know,
okay.
so that was my second group. You know,
Okay.
which lasted from
Now, who were the members of that group?
George Green, the guitarist George Green, and I. We were the founders of the band. But we had some other members like bassist Jaribu Shahid was a member.
Yeah,
you know,
I recently just met Jaribu.
yeah, pianist Rod Williams was a member of that band. So you know how it is with bands. You got cats that come and go.
Now, did you ever record under Stratanova?
You know, yes, yeah, you know what? I was recording then, but not putting anything out. In the 70s, the way it was for independent artists, you know, independent musicians, vinyl was way, way too expensive.
Okay.
It was only when the compact disc came in that created a level playing field for artists to put their products out. So, like I say, I was recording, but I wasn't issuing anything.
Okay.
You know, so starting my company in 2000, I even went back and began issuing everything
Some of the old music.
that I was recording all that time, but never issued, including the Stratanova material.
Okay.
Yeah.
You got to get me some of that so I can put it
Okay.
on the station.
Okay.
And we're closing fast, and I got to touch. You know, you played with Lyman, you played with Ron English, but I see that you also played with the great Rodney Whitaker. So how'd you and Rodney get together?
Well, I'm one of Rodney's mentors.
Okay.
Rodney was part of a youth ensemble that was founded by Donald Washington called Bird Train School Now.
Okay.
And in that band, Rodney Whitaker was in that band, James Carter was in that band, Cassius Richmond was in that band. Rodney's later to be wife, Cookie,
Okay.
who was Cookie Harrell at that time, Chicago Pete's daughter,
Okay.
was in that band. So Donald Washington and I were great friends. So of course I was checking out all the youngsters who was coming in through Bird Train School Now, and I brought a lot of them with me with different ensembles that I was doing. And in the first orchestra that I had, no, actually the first since high school, after high school, I had Regina Carter in that band.
Okay.
So
Now is this before Straight Ahead?
yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. So I was living in a house on Greenfield Road off of Finkel,
Okay.
and at least twice a week, I had a basement full of young people down there. We'd be getting it, you know.
Yeah.
And I have some of those recordings too. I issued those as well.
Hey man, we got to
Oh
do
yeah,
a
this
special.
is a series, man.
Yeah,
This is
because-
ongoing.
Yeah, I'm making a note. You got to rewatch this just to get there, because if you got James Carter, Rodney Whitaker, Regina Carter, all before the
Oh, yeah.
world knew who they were,
Yeah.
when they were just kids in the basement.
Yeah.
we got to hear that, man. We got to have a special listening party for that.
Okay.
But I want to give you some time, man, because we closing in. This time blew by. Talk about your record label and your current projects, etc.
Like I said, when CDs allowed performing artists to have a level playing field to put their products out,
Right.
it was Wendell Harrison who was aware, because I played with him.
Yeah, that's a
you know,
friend.
and a lot, and his wife Pam.
Pam.
So and sometimes they played with me, with Upapada. That was the band that was formed beginning in March of 1995. So Wendell told Pam one time, because he wasn't on the gig, but he told her, I was working with her one evening, and she came up to me and she said, Wendell told me to tell you, you got way too much material not to be putting them CDs out.
Right.
I said, okay. So that was the first time, and I did absolutely nothing. Maybe a week or two later, Pam came to me again and repeated herself. Wendell told me to tell you, you need to put some CDs out because you got way too much material. I got the message the second time around because the guys in the band, they also said, we need to start recording this stuff. That was the birth of my record company, which I call Yuki Plu Records. Now, that's a Detroit story, going back to the 1950s.
Well, we're going to have to hold that one because we're out of time, man. Right now, tell them how to find you real quick before we sign off. Tell them how to contact you.
www.leonardkingdrums.com. Everything. When you go to that link, you're going to see all kinds of information, all kinds of different pages, bio, record company, history, everything.
Yep. Well, I want to thank you for being here, and I want to thank you all for tuning in with us again. Come back next week. I'm going to start letting you know who I'll have the following weeks. So right now, I don't know myself. Right? So that's how organic and fresh this is, but we're going to start trying to give you guys some leeway so you can prepare, but tune in to WJZZDetroitRadio.com to enjoy the music of Dr. Professor King and all these great artists that he talked about. You can hear them on the station, WJZZDetroitRadio.com. But thank you for watching Jazz Cats on Wjzz Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. Please support, like us, share, do all that good stuff. I'll see you all again next Tuesday at 9 p.m. So tune in right here live. And Dr. King, thank you again. We're going to bring you back, man, because you're full of stories. So everybody, good night. See you later.